So you wanna get rich, huh? Wanna create generational wealth? Well, first thing you need to do, some raw chicken in your tummy. Increase your salmon Nutella nutrition. Right now. Second, get the fuck out of here with these influencers. They only do minor little scams. Fuck out of here with these Nigerian scams and shit. If you wanna scam people, let's freaking scam people for real. That's what we are learning. How to generate that real wealth. Multi-generational, 1,000-year wealth. You wanna make money? Let's make real freaking dollar bills. Not some little shitty ass coins or Bitcoin or whatever. We all about that gold. Monopolies. Dominating everybody. Ruthless. Yeah. Banking. Usury is awesome.
With Lincoln out of the way, the money changers' next
Fuck out of
objective
here, Lincoln.
was to gain complete control over America's money. This was no easy task. With the opening of the American West, silver had been discovered in huge quantities. On top of that, Lincoln's greenbacks were generally popular. Despite the European central bankers' deliberate attacks on greenbacks, they continued to circulate in the United States, in fact, until a few years ago. According to historian W. Cleon Skousen,
right after the Civil War, there was considerable talk about reviving Lincoln's brief experiment with the constitutional monetary system. Had not the European Money Trust intervened, it would have no doubt become an established institution.
it is clear that the concept of America printing her own debt-free money sent shockwaves throughout the European central banking elite. They watched with horror as Americans clamored for more greenbacks. They may have killed Lincoln, but support for his monetary ideas grew. On April 12, 1866, nearly 1 year to the day of Lincoln's assassination, Congress went to work at the bidding of the European central banking interests. It passed the Contraction Act, authorizing the Secretary of the Treasury to begin to retire some of the greenbacks in circulation and thereby contract the money supply. Authors Theodore R. Thorin and Richard F. Warner explained the results of the money contraction in their classic book on the subject, The Truth in Money Book.
The hard times which occurred after the Civil War could have been avoided if the greenback legislation had continued as President Lincoln had intended. Instead, there were a series of money panics, what we call recessions, which put pressure.
Those are good. Manipulate people. Manipulate everything. That's rule number one. Illusions, magic tricks, abracadabras. Hell yeah.
On Congress to enact legislation to place the banking system under centralized control.
Second rule, make everything centralized and you are at the top. Remember that. You don't want to get it anywhere close to here. Those are the peasants that your ass is gonna control.
Eventually, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on December 23rd, 1913.
In other words, the money changers wanted two things: the reinstitution of a central bank under their exclusive control, and two, an American currency backed by gold. Their strategy was twofold. First of all, cause a series of panics to try to
Rule number 3, chaos. Chaos everywhere. In the population, in the environment, in everybody's freaking minds and hearts and souls. We need to get these peasants' emotions riled up.
Convinced the American people that only centralized control of the money supply could provide economic stability. And secondly,
Rule number 4, lies. Ties together with the manipulations, but it's a good reminder, lie about everything. Only tell the truth to your bloodline, to your little secret societies, that you are on the top of the pyramid. Remember that one.
remove so much money from the system that most Americans
We were gonna put a reminder on the number $1 bill, so you remember the rules. And the masses, they never gonna get that shit, because they are in chaos. Rule number 3, remember that one.
would be so desperately poor that they either wouldn't care or would be too weak to oppose the bankers.
Exactly, bro.
In 1866, there was $1.8 billion in currency in circulation in the United States, about $50.46
Too
per
much.
capita.
Too much.
In 1867 alone, $500 million, $500 million was removed from the U.S. money
Still
supply.
very bad.
10 years later, in
Now we're
1876,
starting to
America's money
pay.
supply was reduced to only $600 million. In other
Below
words,
$10.
2/3 of America's money had been called in by the bankers. Only $14.60 per capita remained in circulation. 10 years later, the money supply had been reduced to only $400 million, even though the population had boomed. The result was that only $6.67 per capita remained in circulation, a 760% loss in buying power
Great
over
work.
20 years. Today, economists try to sell the idea that recessions and depressions are a natural part of something they call the business cycle.
Rule number 5 or whatever. Propaganda. You need to blackmail, you need to bribe some of these journalists, newscasters. You need to control that so you can educate. Wink, wink. Educate the people in chaos to increase the chaos. We want more chaos. It's never enough chaos. So propaganda, that ties well together with the lies, the manipulation. You start to see everything ties together in harmony. The matrix is so beautiful. It's so well connected. It's so well-oiled machine. And remember the lie about oil as well. It's gonna end in 20 years. And when the 20 years is up, the oil is gonna end in 10 years. Chaos, scarcity, manipulation, lies, propaganda.
The truth is, our money supply is manipulated now just as it was before and after the Civil War. How did this happen? How did money become so scarce? Simple. Bank loans were called in and no new ones were given. In addition, silver coins were melted down. In 1872, a man named Ernest Sed was given 100,000 pounds, about $500,000, by the Bank of England and sent to America to bribe necessary congressmen to get silver demonetized. He was told that if that was not sufficient, to draw an additional 100,000 pounds or as much more as was necessary. The next year, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1873, and the minting of silver dollars abruptly stopped. In fact,
Yeah, as you can see, the politicians, they're always on our sides because blackmail, bribery. Just give them a boat on a lake, little bit of dollar bills, but not too much. We don't want them to start to think they can be a real freaking leaders. I wanna be a real boy. Shut the fuck up. You do as we say. and we got your ass sucking on dick, so we're gonna let the public see that. If you don't listen to what we're gonna tell you, if you're not gonna do how we tell you, the public's gonna see that.
Representative Samuel Hooper, who introduced the bill in the House, acknowledged that Mr. Said actually drafted the legislation. But it gets even worse than that. In 1874, Said himself admitted who was behind the scheme.
I went to America in the winter of 1872-73, authorized to secure, if I could, the passage of a bill demonetizing silver. It was in the interest of those I represented, the governors of the Bank of England, to have it done. By 1873, gold coins were the only form of coin money.
But the contest over control of America's money was not yet over. Only 3 years later, in 1876, with 1/3 of America's workforce unemployed, the population was growing restless. People were clamoring for a return to the greenback money system of President Lincoln, or a return to silver money, anything that would make money more plentiful. That year, Congress created the United States Silver Commission to study the problem. Their report clearly blamed the monetary contraction on the national bankers.
Not
The
true.
report is interesting because it compares the deliberate money contraction by the national bankers after the Civil War to the fall of the Roman Empire.
The disaster of the Dark Ages was caused by decreasing money and falling prices. Without money,
Not true.
civilization could not have had a beginning, and with a diminishing supply, it must languish, and unless relieved, finally perish. At the Christian era, the metallic money of the Roman Empire amounted to $1,800,000,000. By the end of the 15th century, it had shrunk to less than $200 million. History records no other such disastrous transition as that from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages.
Despite this report by the Silver Commission, Congress took no action. The next year, 1877, riots broke out from Pittsburgh to Chicago. The torches of starving vandals lit up the sky. The bankers huddled to decide what to do. They decided to hang on. Now that they were back in control to a certain extent, they were not about to give it up. At the meeting of the American Bankers Association that year, they urged their membership to do everything in their power to put down the notion of a return to greenbacks. The ABA Secretary, James Buell, authored a letter to the members which blatantly called on the banks to subvert not only Congress, but the press.
It is advisable to do all in your power to sustain such prominent daily and weekly newspapers, especially the agricultural and religious press, as will oppose the greenback issue of paper money, and that you will also withhold patronage from all applicants who are not willing to oppose the government issue of money. To repeal the act creating banknotes or to restore to circulation the government issue of money will be to provide the people with money and will therefore seriously affect our individual profits as bankers and lenders. See your congressman at once and engage him to support our interest that we may control legislation.
As political pressure mounted in Congress for change, the press tried to turn the American people away from the truth. The New York Tribune put it this way on January 10th, 1878. The capital of the country is organized at last, and we will see whether Congress will dare to fly in its face. But it didn't work entirely. On February 28, 1878, Congress passed the Sherman Law, allowing the minting of a limited number of silver dollars, ending the 5-year hiatus. This did not end gold backing of the currency, however, nor did it completely free silver. Previous to
Sometimes you gotta give little bit back to the peasants so they don't revolt too much until we get methods and technologies to make the peasants super weak. But back then we didn't really have those. unlock yet. So sometimes you're gonna give little bit back to the peasants, to give little hope, to give little piece of hope to the peasants' mind and their heart, so they can procreate, so we can have more slaves.
1873, anyone who brought silver to the U.S. Mint could have it struck into silver dollars free of charge. No longer. But at least some money began to flow back into the economy again. With no further threat to their control, the bankers loosened up on loans, and the post-Civil War depression was finally ended.
3 years later, the American people elected Republican James Garfield president. Garfield understood how the economy was being manipulated. As a congressman, he had been chairman of the Appropriations Committee and was a member of Banking and Currency. After his inauguration, he slammed the money changers publicly in 1881.
Bad move.
Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate. Unfortunately, within a few weeks of making this statement, on July 2nd of 1881, President Garfield was assassinated.
Oops. RIP.
The money changers were gathering strength fast. They began a periodic fleecing of the flock, as they called it, by creating economic booms followed by further depressions so they could buy up thousands of homes and farms for pennies on the dollar. In 1891, the money changers prepared to take the American economy down again, and their methods and motives were laid out with shocking clarity in a memo sent out by the American Bankers Association, the ABA, an organization in which most bankers were members. Notice that this memo called for bankers to create a depression on a certain date 3 years in the future. According to the congressional record, here's how it read in part. On September 1st, 1894, we will not renew our loans under any consideration. On September 1st, we will demand our money. We will foreclose and become mortgagees in possession. We can take 2/3 of the farms west of the Mississippi and thousands of them east of the Mississippi as well at our price. Then the farmers will become tenants, as in England. These depressions could be controlled because America was on the gold money standard. Since gold is scarce, it's one of the easiest commodities to manipulate. People wanted silver money legalized again so they could escape the stranglehold the money changers had on gold money. People wanted silver money reinstated, reversing Mr. Said's Act of 1873, by then called the Crime of 73. By 1896, the issue of more silver money had become the central issue in the presidential campaign. William Jennings Bryan, a senator from Nebraska, ran for president as a Democrat on the free silver issue. At the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, he made an emotional speech which won him the nomination, entitled Crown of Thorns and Cross of Gold. Though Bryan was only 36 years old at the time, this speech is widely regarded as the most famous oration ever made before a political convention. In the dramatic conclusion, Bryan said,
"We will answer their demand for our gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold."
The bankers lavishly supported the Republican candidate, William McKinley, who favored the gold standard. The resulting contest was amongst the most fiercely contested presidential races in American history. Bryan made over 600 speeches in 27 states. The McKinley campaign got manufacturers and industrialists to inform their employees that if Bryan were elected, all factories and plants would close and there would be no work. The ruse succeeded. McKinley beat Bryan by a small margin. Bryan ran for president again in 1900 and in 1908, but fell short each time. During the 1912 Democratic Convention, Bryan was a powerful figure who helped Woodrow Wilson win the nomination. When Wilson became president, he appointed Bryan as Secretary of State, but Bryan soon became disenchanted with the Wilson administration.
Bryan served only 2 years in the Wilson administration before resigning in 1915 over the highly suspicious sinking of the Lusitania, the event which was used to drive America into World War I. Although William Jennings Bryan never gained the presidency, his efforts delayed the money changers for 17 years from attaining their next goal, a new, privately owned central bank for America.
Yeah, bro. Oh, we did that. Anyway, start banking if you want to make real money. Usury is awesome. And remember, never go outside. Never ever. That place sucks. Ass. And stinks.